How you doing? Today we're going to be talking about immersion. A lot of times when we're talking about going to the end, a lot of times many people say, well, how do I do that? And so what we're going to do is talk about some tools that will allow you to do that. I'm having to do it a different way. My computer basically was just spiraling and I was going to go to another computer, but for the sake of time, I decided just going to get started. And what I'm going to use is my other smartphone as my guide just to make sure that I don't miss any of the points. So just bear with me. But again, what we're going to be talking about is immersion. I was talking to a colleague and she and I were talking about, she was talking about science and her research. And we kind of went in this circle because she was thinking about how could she basically help people make a immediate change. And I'm working on a book called Quantumatics. And so, oh, of course, you can ask questions. But do me a favor, try not to make them too long. And reason being is because when they flash up, they only flash up for like a few seconds. And so in those few seconds, I got to read what it is that you're saying. So if you want to break it up into multiple parts, that's fine. But try to give me enough that I can read in 2 seconds so I can answer your question appropriately. Because if it's too long, I'm going to try to read it and it's going to disappear and I'm not going to get the essence of your question. So, yes, you can ask questions. So, we're talking about immersion today. So, what we're going to do is talk about how you can get into state immediately for it's not a problem. Thanks for asking the question. For asking, I got off track, but that's okay. How to get in state immediately. So that's what we're going to tell you about immersion, you getting into state immediately. Like I said, because my computer's down, I normally use that as my background. I can basically scroll through my list of things that I want to talk about. But today I'm going to use my second smartphone and use that as a guide so that I don't miss my talking points. So we're going to talk about immersion. In immersion, we're going to use an acronym, of course, called immersions. And so the I stands for identify your future self with clarity. Now, what does this mean? A lot of times, many of us want to change states, but what happens is we have a vague ideal of who it is that we want to be, do, or have. So, today, what we're going to do is talk about some tools that will allow you to get in state more readily. And so, as you begin to identify, for example, I talk about a gentleman by the name of Carl. Carl was a store clerk. And he decided one day that he wanted to be a millionaire. Everybody decides that they want to be a millionaire. Carl did something about it. He started using what he knew about the law of attraction and he started getting into state. He started deciding, okay, I want to be a multimillionaire. And he started studying what he knew about money. Now, he went through several courses before he decided upon what it was that he wanted to do. He decided that he wanted to do cryptocurrency. And so he got involved with Bitcoin. Now, again, he was still working as a clerk in a store, making what we consider minimum wage in Sweden. He started investing small amounts of his earnings into Bitcoins as he continued to learn about what it was that he wanted to do. Carl had already accessed the mindset of being a millionaire. Within a 3-year time frame, Carl had become a multi-millionaire. From a 5 to 7 year period, Carl had become a billionaire. Now, what's the difference between Carl and everybody else that say that they want to be millionaires? Carl clothed himself in the persona of being a multimillionaire. He started learning, he started studying, he started learning everything that he could about making money. He decided upon something. Who is it that you want to do, be, or have? You have to identify who that person is. Now, early on, what you may find yourself doing is finding a role model, somebody that you can identify with, and start learning from them. Even the great Warren Buffett learned from Benjamin Graham, and he started modeling early on what he knew about Benjamin Graham. But understand this, when you decide that person that you want to be, you may model, let's say, someone like Neville Goddard, Joseph Murphy, Reverend Ike, whoever your influencer is, that teacher is. But you're going to discover your own voice. As you begin to study your teachers and you discover your own voice, you're going to start articulating a message uniquely yours. A lot of times people listen to my mentor, Mr. Lindell, and they want him to be Neville Goddard. He's not Neville Goddard. No more than Neville Goddard was Abdullah, his teacher. And whoever Abdullah's teacher was, no more than Abdullah was his teacher. You learn the principles of a Neville Goddard, a Joseph Murphy, a Reverend Ike, a Mr. Lindo, but then you make them your own. You start learning your own precepts and concepts about the principles that you're learning. Many of us just want to emulate someone else, but understand this: the world doesn't need another Neville Goddard, another Reverend Ike, another Joseph Murphy, another Mr. Lindo, whomever you're, another Joe Dispenza, whomever. The world doesn't need another them. They need you to be the best version of you that you can be. So you learn from those great teachers, you identify with those great teachers, and then you discover your own unique voice. So let's go to the next point. And like I said, I'm using my smartphone so that I don't miss any points. So the next thing that we're going to do is get into the mindset of that person. So you've identified who it is that you want to be, do, or have. Now you have to get into the mindset of the person that you want to be. Say that you want to learn a new skill set. Find out, let's say that you're in a sales office and there's top performers in that sales office. Start emulating early on, especially because you're new. Start emulating early on. And it's okay for people to say, oh, you're just trying to be blah, blah, blah. You're going to discover your own unique voice. But you got to take on the persona of someone who has gone before you. As you begin clothing yourself, immersing yourself in that new persona, what's going to happen is, again, like I stated earlier, you're going to discover your own unique voice. But early on, because, let me give you an example. Children, early on, have no idea who they are. They're trying to discover who they are. So first, they take their cues from their parents, from their environment, from their siblings, whoever the person is that that child admires. It could be a sibling that's very close in age, and they start mirroring that sibling. But over time, they're going to discover their own unique voice. The problem happens when we discover our own unique voice and people still want us to be like they saw us early on. You're not going to stay the same. You're going to discover your unique voice. You're going to discover your unique message, whatever environment you're in. You could be in a real estate. You can be in influencing people, whatever. It doesn't matter. Once you discover your unique message and you start sharing that unique message, you're going to begin to gravitate to your unique audience. So immerse yourself first and foremost in who it is that you want to be. You got to decide, make a decision. As you make that decision, what's going to happen is all the world's going to start to acquiesce to you according to the decision that you make. And so we talk about the story of the master teacher, and there was a time where he started doing miracles. And people said, we know him. He's beside himself. He's not the person that we knew. You're going to grow and outgrow your identities if you're the exact same person, no matter what your religious beliefs are, whatever your uh, environmental beliefs are, no matter what you believe, if you're the exact same person that you were even a year ago, there's something wrong, because we're to grow and to outgrow. So you're continuously to be taking on new information. You're continuously, like a child, if a child is at the same level of development when they were 3 and when they're 7, we take that child to a doctor because, of course, we know that there's something wrong. Now, when adults do it, we think it's okay. You're not to be spiritually. I'm not the same person that I was 5 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But there's a lot of people in religious circles, they're at the exact same place. They're at a state of spiritual retardation. And forgive me for using that word because I know it's not politically correct. What I'm saying is that they haven't grown. They have their growth is stunted. And we think that that's okay. And a lot of times, especially when I start speaking on certain things, especially what people deem spiritual or religious, a lot of people in the spiritual community, they come out of the woodwork and they say, well, what you're teaching is heresy. No, what it is growth. And I understand because I've been them that they're not at the level of understanding because I wasn't. And if I had heard it 20 years ago, I would have said blasphemy, heresy, and all this stuff. But I'm telling you what has been given to me and according to what we call scripture. Scripture says that you are divine beings. So when I say that you're divine beings, I didn't come up with this. This is scripture. When I say that the mind is powerful, this is scripture saying that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. I didn't come up with anything new. I'm just articulating it from my vernacular and something that I believe that my audience can resonate with. But when you do that, when you begin stepping outside your proverbial box, you're going to be challenged. And you got to understand that most people are not going to understand what it is that's been given to you, whether it be in business, whether it be in your relationships, whether it be in, let's say, so called religion, no matter what it is that you're involved in, most people are not going to understand what's been given to you at a spiritual level. Because I promise you this, spirit is going to give you things that look contrary to what most of the world is saying. That's just the way it is. When you're enlightened, and I'm not saying that I'm more enlightened than anybody else, but when I'm saying this, when spirit speaks to me, when father speaks to me, when mother speaks to me and give me insight and I share that insight, I understand that not everybody's going to be able to get it because they're still operating from their dogmas, as it were, and they have not the ears to hear. That's not my business. That's between them and what we call source, God, whatever, infinite intelligence. It's not your business who gets your message. Your business is to convey the message. What God, source, energy, life force has given to you to convey. And I promise you, your message is going to be uniquely yours. It's going to sound like other people's, but there's going to be certain things that only you will be given. We're all Elohims, one God made up of the many. And that infinite intelligence we know as God is speaking through each and every one of us. But understand, there's no two snowflakes that are the same, no two raindrops that are the same, no two leaves that are the same. Why do we think that we as human beings have to be the same as somebody else? You're not going to be. Understand that. So, as you convey your unique message to the world and you begin to find yourself immersed in that, your life is going to change because you're not going to be the same person. I often say it this way: you're vibrational beings, energy systems having a human experience. But God, as God, is speaking uniquely through you as you. I know that's hard and deep for some of you, but God is speaking uniquely as you, in you, through you, for you, and conveying its message, his message, her message as you. We're all parts of the entity known as the divine or what we call God. Let's not make it religious. Call it energy, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter what you call it. But as you understand your uniqueness, as that entity known as divine source, God, infinite intelligence, whatever, and you begin sharing your unique message, that's God conveying himself, herself as you. Somebody asked me recently about I am. How do you utilize I am? We're utilizing I am morning, noon, and night. Whatever we believe about the ego, individual us, and let's not make ego evil or whatever. People want to make ego evil. Ego isn't evil. If infinite intelligence, whatever we call that infinite intelligence known as God, has created it, it can't be evil. It said that all things are good. It's how we use the tool of ego. Most of us have allowed ego to run the show, but we're spiritual beings. Now, understand this being spiritual beings, and I say this often because I know that there's somebody hearing this for the first time. Somebody asked recently, how do I use the tool of I am? You use the tool of I am by whatever you say about who it is that you are, then I'm smart. You're basically merging ego, God, infinite intelligence, with that identity of me being smart. You say that I'll never amount to anything. Then you're impregnating infinite intelligence in you as you, we call ego, with I'll never amount to anything. What happens is then you begin to clothe yourself in the ideology of I'll never amount to anything. Now, what happens? Because you're immersed in the ideology of I'll never amount to anything, you'll start looking for the evidence of, see, I told you I'll never amount to anything. But on the contrary, you say, listen, I'm going to be abundant. Yeah, I'm going to change lives all around the world. Then you begin clothing yourself in the identity of that. Now, unfortunately, with many of us, we've clothed ourselves in the identity of other people's belief system. Let me say that again. We've clothed ourselves in the identity of other people's belief system about who it is that we are to be. Early on, somebody said, you're not smart, you're not intelligent, you'll never amount to anything. And so you go about looking for the evidence of what other people have said about you, and you keep carrying it into your future or right now in your present until you, at this moment, have a different thought. You say, wow, I never thought about that. I'm living out other people's belief system. Now, at this moment, you begin to change your belief system. You begin to have a new identity. This is immersion. Whatever you clothe spirit in, we call that clothing belief, attitudes, dispositions, moods. All of those things is how we clothe spirit. And whatever we clothe that energy we call spirit in, that's what we begin to partake of at the given moment. So at this moment, you can say, you know what? I'm going to start living more prosperous. I'm going to start living more abundant. You begin to re-educate yourself. You start following, listening to people who have the identity of abundance. You start living from a place of abundance, loving relationships, better health. Once you start clothing yourself, and again, I know that this sounds sci-fi for some of you, but you got to bear with me. Science bears this out. We talk about the multiple possibilities of who you can be, do, or have. As you start operating from belief system, whatever becomes your core belief, that's what you're going to start living out. And you can change that in a moment. I often will say, just believe it possible. People say, oh, no, you got to know so. Sometimes you're not at a place of know so. Sometimes you're just operating solely at a place of hope so, believe so, thinking it's possible. Now, do you graduate into know so? Absolutely. But first, you got to see a different possibility. Understand, we've all been programmed. We've been programmed from the moment, even before we've come out of our mother's womb. And a lot of it is generational programming. We don't even know that we believe it until it shows up, and it keeps showing up in our lives like, I'm working hard and why can't I ever make enough money? It goes back to your core belief systems about what you believe about money. Why can't I operate and be in a loving relationship? It goes back to your core beliefs and what you believe about relationship. Why can't I improve in my health? It goes back to your core beliefs and what you believe about health. But once you take on simply it possible to change this identity, move from what we believe as sci-fi to, man, I'm creating this. See, until we begin to acknowledge that we're the cause, not some entity, not people, not who's in government, who's in power, but I'm the cause of my current reality. When I take on that ideology that if it's to be, it's up to me, and it starts with my thinking. Okay, now I have a short out there by a gentleman by the name of T. Herb Eckert. His book about 15, 20 years ago was The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. T. Herb Ecker was living in his parents' basement, and his dad said, T. Herb, you're a bum, and you're going to always be a bum. He said, Dad, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I hit upon hard times, and I'm trying to turn my life around. He says, what do you do? Uh, and he says, I like business. He said, well, no, you don't, because you're not facilitating business. He said, there's a thing called a library card. Go out and get one and go find out what people who really love business or are successful in business, find out what they do. T. Herb immersed himself in millionaires, billionaires, and billion and building businesses and so forth. And he did this for 6 months. Then he started his own business. The first one wasn't very successful, but he did another one. He found something that he found agreement with, and it was in the health and fitness area. That's where he got his first $1 million, and he built from there. Then he built this, started the book. He started working seminars and workshops. Tony Robbins said this about T. Herb Ecker. He said, I see a lot of people doing workshops. He says, but that guy was probably one of the few people that worked as hard as I worked, and I knew that he was going to be successful. What is it that you're passionate about? Now, understand this, it doesn't matter. Hey, John Wick, it doesn't matter what you're passionate about. Understand this, once you start sharing it with the world, you're going to discover your audience and people that need what it is that you have and that you're offering. I reached out to one of my coaching clients recently, and she was posting these very beautiful TikTok videos. But there was, she has this program that's phenomenal. It helps women begin to re identify their body style and so forth, and then begin to help them change their body style. And she's holding this stuff like a deck of cards close to the chest, and she's not sharing it with the world, but she keeps posting these beautiful videos, but nothing about her product. I'm like, you're cheating the world. If you have something that can potentially transform somebody's life, no matter what it is and what arena that it's in, and you're holding it, keeping it to yourself, you're not facilitating your version of God in the world, and the world is being cheated because they don't have what it is that you know, and you're not sharing it with them. You're doing the world a disservice. I'm speaking to you, whoever you are out there. You're doing the world a disservice. Share with the world what it is that's been given to you, that's transformed your life, that's changed your life, and watch how people show up to basically purchase what it is that you have to offer. Share with the world what it is that's been given to you. Don't keep holding it to your chest and cheating the world of God's gift in you. It's not fair. You're doing the world a disservice. Forget about the naysayers. The naysayers are going to always be there. But share with the world what God has given to you. Clothe yourself and be great in spite of everybody else and the naysayers. Let me get back to my phone so I can get to my next point. I don't want to miss all of them. I got a certain amount of time. I want to be sensitive of your time. Okay, we'll talk about a mind shift. We talked about changing your mindset. Begin to mirror successful people. Find out somebody that's doing exactly what it is that you're doing or want to do. And like I said, mirror them early on. Don't worry about people say, oh, you're just being like, it's going to start off that way. There's a guy by the name of Brandon Burchard. About 16 years ago, he came up with the, what was it, the millionaire something. It was bottom line. It was a wonderful book. And when I first started listening to Brandon, he sounded like Tony Robbins. His mannerism, his call to action, because that was the catalyst that motivated him to change. There's people that I hear out there and they're talking, they sound like Neville Goddard. But as they go on in their journey, pretty soon they discover their own unique voice. Find out who's doing what it is that you're doing, no matter what it is that you're doing. There's somebody out there doing it successfully and they're making buku loads of money. Now you say, well, coach, can it always be about money? It's not always about money, but understand it's about money. We can change more lives with it than we can without it. A broke person can, I'll have to say that Proverbs says that nobody listens to a broke person. And it's true. Green, you got to give me less. I'll read what I can on the change your program. In fact, about ex fiance. Listen, I'm gonna say this from the little that I read about your post. If you want, let's say your ex back, I'm not a big proponent of SP, but let me say this about getting your ex back. You become the best version of you. You start loving yourself because I've been you and I've been in relationships and I try to get that relationship back. And I would swear to the person, listen, I've changed. You know, I'm not the same person that I was. I'm not that knucklehead anymore. I've been rehabilitated. In the course of that relationship and getting that person back, the knucklehead showed back up. What am I saying to you? Get in a loving relationship with yourself. Start loving on you. Start being the best version of you. And I'll say this, you may either get that other person back, that X back, that SP back, whatever you want to call it, or you're going to get something better. But even far better than that, you're going to be somebody better. Often you lost that person because you were vibrating a certain frequency. We don't have money because we're vibrating a certain frequency. We don't have health because we're vibrating a certain frequency. Everything in our lives is based off of vibration. If you want anything back in your life, SP, whatever, you have to be in the frequency of that thing that you're trying to attract. It says, to him who has, more shall be given. When you're operating from the frequency of the having, you're going to attract more of that into your life automatically. But when you're in a lower frequency, I do not laugh out loud. I don't know what that means, but again, I only got a portion of your, so let me continue on. And if I answer it, hopefully I do. When you're not operating at the frequency uh, of the thing that you desire, you're not going to keep it. You can get with all types of coaches and they can promise, oh, I have you have your SP in 24 hours. It's a lie. It says this in scripture for those who bear with me and allow me to use it. There's a lot of powerful scriptural principles that have nothing to do with religion. It says, how can two walk together unless there's a spirit of agreement? This is vibration. Many of us don't have what it is. If you don't have what it is that you want, it's simply that you're not in vibration with that which you want. If you want a person, if you want health, if you want more money, you have to get into vibration of it. You say, well, coach, how do I do that? First and foremost, it's what we're talking about, immersion. You have to immerse yourself in the information. Let's say that I'm bad in relationships and I've had 2 or 3 marriages and broken relationships. I need to start then educating myself with people who are successful in relationships, in money, in health. Once I start creating a track record, what happens is I start getting the vibration of that thing that I want. Absolutely. Love you. Start it right now. Wonderful. Exactly. You don't want to go back, but the way that you don't go back is you start going forward, but you go forward with new information. As you begin pouring that new information, you start changing your belief system. The wonderful thing about who you are as a energy being is that your reality isn't fixed. Once you start taking on new ideology, once you start taking on new belief, once you take on how to treat a person, another individual in a relationship, for example, and you start operating from it, like I said, it may not be the person that you think that you want. A lot of times we're operating at an ego level. An ego says, I want what I want. But spirit says, I have something far better than you can ask, think, and or imagine. So as green becomes the better person, the better version of himself, herself, itself, you begin to attract bigger, better, more. And you get into a relationship that's so much better than you could ask, think, and or imagine. You start receiving abundance far more than you could ask, think, or imagine. Your health starts to improve far better than you could ever believe that it was even possible. You understand what I'm saying? But you have to get into vibration. That's us re-educating ourselves, pouring new information in. Listen, let me say how easy it is though. Love you. It's so easy that you could watch a movie. I watched a movie years ago called Limitless, and I loved it because I said, man, I can do that. He took this drug and all of a sudden he was operating off of this level of intelligence. And I said, I can do that. We watched The Matrix and we watched them get spiritual downloads. You can watch one person's program and you say, that's the person I want to be. Not that individual, but the ideology of that person. And you can start operating immediately as that new person. But you have to get into you new information. We can't go beyond the level of our knowing unless we get a spiritual download. Spirit gives us new insight of our new identity. There was a person in the Old Testament called Gideon, and his name was Rosubable. I just tore that name up, but his name turned out to be Gideon. Gideon had a spiritual download, a insight, a plug-in from divine intelligence called Spirit, called God, called Lord, whatever. He became a different person. And they started looking and saying, is this Zerubbabel? I mean, Zerubbabel, he grew up with us, but this is the hand of Gideon. And so the Spirit wanted to let Gideon see how powerful he was. So he and one of his soldiers went into the camp of his enemy. And they said, I had a dream last night. And this barley loaf came and it destroyed the whole camp. They said, that's nothing more than the hand of Gideon. When green starts walking differently, acting differently, people are going to start seeing you differently. That girl that you lost, she's going to start seeing the better version of you. And she perhaps will want to get back with you. My question is, when you become that better version of you, will you want to get back with her? I don't know. But when we're operating from a place of ego, we see right now as good as it gets. We think that this current reality, let me give you an example. Years ago, I was living in California and I was seeing this young lady. Her mom and I were friends. So when I went back home to Ohio to visit, she said, oh, uh, my daughter, I don't want to mention her name, but she said she's in California now. She's a flight attendant. So we connected and we were talking about getting married. And so she told me she had this old Nova. It was like this was like in the 90s, and this thing was like in the 70s. But it was a tank of a car. It was reliable. But she said, when we get married, I love to have a nice Honda Accord. Now, you got to understand, I'm living in California, got a roommate. I'm making about $9, $10 an hour. I couldn't see Honda Accord money, and I panicked. I even got angry because I couldn't fulfill the promise of the Honda Accord being married. I felt like I was being shortchanged, and I felt like she was testing me and pushing me to a limit that I couldn't see for myself. Why do I bring this up? You're seeing where you're at the moment, and you believe that this is the best version of you because this is all that you've known. When we immerse ourselves in something bigger, better, more, like Carl did, Runefeld, he's Sweden now, and he's in Dubai. His site is called The Moon. So if you want to see more, but he's a trader now, and he does, and he's turning into a billionaire plus. But this started 7 years ago when he worked as a store clerk, and he said he wanted to be wealthy. What about you? People tend to drop out when I start talking about money. That ain't my business. My business is to share with you the story of who you can be. It has nothing to do money. Money's an easy thing because people can measure money. What I'm telling you though is that if it's health, if it's that loving relationship, once you start immersing yourself in that new identity, once it becomes you, things are going to start showing up. Some things are going to make us uncomfortable because we've never been there before. But you have to move through the valley of illusion. You have to do that thing that you've never done before. You have to become that person. But you do it from seeing your ideal self, that person that you see in the future 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when you retire. You get into that future state and you see, and then you come back to the present and you start being. Time isn't fixed. We've been given the impression that time is fixed. So we think that when we imagine our past, that that's fairy tale, and I didn't really change my past, but I'm imagining, make believing that I changed my past, so my past has changed. That past has changed when you go back and you start remembering that differently. When you go into your future and you start seeing a family, when you start seeing yourself as that future self, that's not make believe. That's you forming in your mind, but it also begins to take shape in reality. This stuff has been proven. I put a video out there, the things that the top 1% don't want us to know. I'm going to set my phone down and I'm going to go on autopilot because I think that I can share with you better than the points that I have. I'm going to take this last 25 minutes and really try to pour this stuff into you. Absolutely. You walk on the streets of New York or wherever you at as though they are where you want to be. You start living, you start clothing yourself. Years ago, I was due for a new car, and my old car was kind of on its last three wheels. I started visualizing my new car. What happened was I was driving through this back street, and this lady pulled out of this driveway, and she was driving what I only thought to be a spaceship. Some back to the car type future. It was so beautiful. And I said, that's my car. Not her car, but my, you know what I'm saying. I started envisioning, like my friend was talking about being on the streets of Barbados, even though he's walking in the streets of New York. I was driving my car on the three wheels, but in my mind's eye, I was driving that ideal car. I didn't know how it was going to show up or anything. I was just driving that car. So everybody else was seeing my car on three wheels. But I, inside that car, was in my new car. Over a course of time in a series of events, let me tell you that this stuff doesn't just pop out of thin air, but events and circumstances begin to line up. Maybe I get a job making more money. An opportunity presents itself that all of a sudden now I have $10,000 in the bank that I didn't have before because of an investment opportunity. This is how it shows up. I want to tell you that that's how it shows up because a lot of times people want to give you the impression that you just stay in your mind and miraculously stuff just kind of shows up. It does, but it often shows up because of seeds that we have planted, things that we have done, people that we know. Somebody told me recently that out of thin air, a person passed and they left her $10,000. She said she had no idea why this person, she said she probably said less than 20 words to the person, but she was kind. And I'll say this, when you think that nobody else is watching you, somebody's watching you. This person watched how she conducted business. They watched how she interacted with her family. They watched how responsible she was with the stuff that she did. She didn't realize the person was watching. And the person said, I want her to take care of my funeral arrangements, but I also want to leave her $10,000. This is how the bridge of incident shows up. When you're being the best version of yourself, somebody's watching. You may be talking about training video, how to get your best body, whatever. And you say, well, nobody's watching that video. All of a sudden somebody says, you know what? I've seen what you've done and I want to hire you as a coach. You say, well, I don't know anything about coaching, but you know how to get them to get their best body. And they offer you $10,000. Then the next person shows up. You see what I'm saying? You don't lift a finger because you don't know the finger to lift, but you always put your best version of who you are, be, doing, and having. As you're living from that best version, John, I'll see if I can read as much of this as I can. Never use too small doses of meetings with. I lost, John. You gave me too much. You got to break it down in small. Guys, if you want to send me a message, love the messages and so forth. But if you send me a book, they give me like 3 seconds to read the book. If you can break it into bite-sized pieces, so you got to think to yourself, how can I convey this so the coach Carlo could get it? Because listen, if it's too much, I'm not going to be able to read it, and I'm not going to be able to facilitate what it is that you're saying, or I may just be able to say thank you for the share, but I want to make sure that I'm reading what it is that you're sharing. So give me less words, so that I can see if I can read it. Because like I said, they flashed me for about 2 seconds and it's gone. So love you. If you want to resend it, you can do that. But Neville gave a lot of great examples. What I'm saying to you is, as you start believing that new reality being possible, what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing the evidence of that new reality being possible. Then you start clothing yourself in that new possibility, and you do it repeatedly, consistently, and repeatedly. As you continue to make that your lifestyle, it's going to start showing up. All of a sudden, Neville's one of his greatest students was Louise Barlet, and this woman was a woman of action. She would go to a country and there was no hotel, but she believed that there was a hotel for her. Now, she didn't just go to her hotel and go to sleep and lift not a finger. She started knocking on doors of other hotels because it was a holiday season when she went. If you go and look, listen to her book or pull up her book on YouTube, Louise Barlet, student of Neville, she tells you the formula for manifestation. If you go through, I mean, it's a master course if you're listening to her book on how to manifest. But she would go, she was a woman of action. She first and foremost saw it in her head, like we all should do. You should see what it is as clear as anybody else, even as people that you know, nearer than hands and feet. You should see that vision of who it is that you're being, doing, and having always before you. But then there's the other side that nobody wants to talk about. Absolutely, it did. Neville's Judas who came to fulfill Scripture. Absolutely. Uh, uh, Judas betrayed Christ, but we're all betraying the divine within us by telling the story. So you're absolutely correct, John Wick. Um, Thanks for breaking that down and making it short. I appreciate that. As we do that, as we begin to live out the story, as we begin to tell the story, we become the betrayers of the secret. It's not a secret, but most people don't know that thoughts become things. This is Mr. Little's primary message. As you think you are, you do, you have, you be. It's Neville's message. As we begin to understand, I kind of started touching on this, so I want to touch on it again. The top 1% or 0.00001% understand that thoughts become things and they utilize it to the full. But we think to ourselves, man, they're geniuses. They have all this insight. They just understand that what they think about and what they give their attention to most often is going to show up in their lives. So they're purposeful in what it is that they give their attention to. It's not magic. We've made it magic. It's how we work. So as we understand that this is how we work, that thoughts become things, we start directing. Now, understand this. Let me say this as a caveat. Just because it hasn't shown up in days, weeks, months, even years in some cases, doesn't mean that it's not working. Some of the greatest people in history, their manifestation took years before it showed up. Albert Einstein was nothing more than a C student in school. He worked in a patent office. Most people wrote him off as a dreamer, but he started working with his wife and other people on quantum mechanics, how behind the scene worked. And he came up with the theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, and it transformed the world. Albert Einstein had to get that person in his mind first, even before anybody else saw who Albert Einstein was. Because the truth of the matter is, fully awake and fully aware, absolutely. As we become fully awake and fully aware, and we start saying, okay, if my thoughts create my reality, let me start thinking from a place of abundance, from love, from health. But you don't stop there. You start living and acting. You start immersing yourself in that person. You say, well, Coach, well, I don't know how to do that. There's tens of thousands of people on hundreds of platforms that will tell you how they learned how to do it. You start listening and you start doing what works for you. Everybody, listen, and let me say this about the Neville Goddard community. I love Neville, but Neville's principles is not going to be for everybody. You may find that Joe Dispenza, Reverend Ike, Joseph Murphy works better for you. That's totally okay. You have to find that method, that teacher that resonates with you. Don't get into a competition and it's us against them. No, it's you against you. You have to find out what works best for you and utilize. If you're utilizing, let's say, a Neville Goddard principle, and you find that it's not working for you, discard it and try something else. It's okay. Neville did not want to become a religion unto us, and that's what he's become into many of these communities. He gave you tools. Joseph Murphy gave you tools. I'm giving you tools. Mr. Lindell's giving you tools. Reverend Ice giving you tools. You take the tools that work best for you and you utilize them. And what's going to happen is you're going to create your own tools. It's true. You're going to create your own tools. You're going to find some things that, okay, well, I didn't like the way that that worked, but I'm going to tweak it and I'm going to do this. And you're going to say, wow, I found what worked for me. Now, everybody's going to come to you and say, can you tell me what worked for you? What works for you is not going to work for everybody. That's okay. But your job is to dispense and to share with them. Me telling you to go into your future, begin to immerse yourself in the ideology of your future, it works for me and it works for a lot of people. But you say, well, it just doesn't work for me. Then you try something else. It's okay. What I'm doing is giving you permission to find out what works for you. But it won't work for you if you don't try it, if you don't test it. Scripture says, test me herewith and see if I will not open up the windows of heaven and pour you out such a blessing. Understand the windows of heaven. Love works, love it. The windows of heaven is the mind of men and women. When Spirit pours out you a blessing, it's insight, it's knowledge, it's wisdom. Now, it's what we do with that insight, wisdom, knowledge that we see if we benefit from it. If we're given an insight, knowledge, wisdom, and we do nothing with it, it's as good as not receiving it. You've been given, and I'm speaking because I know from personal experience, you've been given dozens, if not more, of ideas of how to improve your life, how to improve other people's life, how to make money, how to improve relationships, and you've done nothing with them. Or you've tried them once or twice and you say, well, that stuff doesn't work. Or, you wonder, why would universe, God, source give you something this great? Because the universe wants to see if you're going to utilize it. Understand this. When an ideal is given, it's not just given to one person. It's given to hundreds, if not thousands of people. And this is why you can have two men go to the patent office, have the exact same patent, but just because one man got to the patent office a few moments earlier, his patent was accepted. We know that person being Graham Bell. So it's Bell Telephone for those in the US. Everybody knows some Bell system that started from Graham Bell. But we could be saying Gray Telephone because, see, there was another man that was just moments behind Graham Bell. His name was Elijah Gray. Elijah Gray slipped. He was a few moments behind. Graham got the patent in first. So again, we talk about Bell telephones, but we really could be talking today about Gray Telephone. Now you say, well, Coach, why is that relevant to me? There's stuff that is continuously being given to you to bless you, to bless others, to bless the world. And you're not moving forward with it. You write it off as, man, that was a great idea. Man, where did that come from? Then what happens is, thank you. Then what happens is you go to the store or you go online and your idea shows up. You say, I had that idea months ago, years ago, and I didn't do anything with it. Understand this universe source energy. We're all connected. So many people pick up on the vibration of what it is that you're picking up. Point in case, I was talking to a young lady the other day. We were communicating, and I kind of talked about this earlier. She was explaining this point about immersion, being immersed into ideology and so forth, and taking on that new concept. And so she was kind of going all around it, and I'm not clear on what it was that she was saying. I'm like, okay, if you, I thought that she had this concept, this ideal, this belief system, and I thought she was withholding it from me. I'm like, okay, if you're not going to share the ideal, let's stop talking about it. I'm like, because you're going all around it. It wasn't that she didn't want to share the idea; she couldn't articulate it. Anyway, she got into telling me the ideal, and I said, that's a part of a book that I'm writing. I said, before you do anything else, I said, give me a second. I want to copy a portion of the book and I want to send it to you. It was the same ideal that she was sharing about immersion. She just didn't know how to communicate it. But the same idea, the same concept was in the book that I'm going to be publishing here shortly. What am I saying to you? Because we're all connected, Elohim, the one God made up of many, that ideal, that concept that you have isn't just given to you. So the person, and understand this, you're not going to be just given one ideal, but the way that it works, when you start acting upon the one, you'll start realizing more. But when you don't take action on the one, then you're not going to be open to the ram of the bush of the other opportunities, the other ideals. You're going to be closed off. And the more you shut down that faculty in your brain housing group, in your mind, the less that is going to be shown. And you're going to say, God never speaks to me. God's always speaking. Whatever you call that infinite intelligence, God is always speaking. The problem is we're not listening. And when the way that you show that you're listening, you take action on the thing that you've been given. We can say that we believe anything in the world and what it is that we believe, but lifestyle always mirrors our beliefs. We call that reality. Reality is the mirror of what it is that you believe. So whatever keeps showing up in the mirror of reality consistently, persistently, that's what you believe. But coach, that's not what I believe. If it keep this is not me. It's not me. I didn't come up with this. Be it unto you according to your belief, your faith. If it keeps showing up in your mirror of reality over and over again, you got some stuff that you need to deal with and you need to change or rearrange. You need to take on new memory system, new belief system. But if it keeps showing up in the mirror called reality, Jesus called it fruit. You should know a tree. The tree is symbolic of who you are. You should know a tree. You should know a person by the fruit he or she bears. What keeps showing up in our life, if it's lack, loss, and limitation, or if it's wisdom, wellness, and wealth, it's because that's what we believe at our core level. You say, well, how do I change that? You start by changing, first and foremost, acknowledging, okay, my beliefs are not taking me where I want to go. Once we understand, okay, my beliefs are not, then we start pouring into ourselves. Now, understand, when you start listening to new information, ego, because it's designed to protect you. Now, understand this, you can use ego to your advantage, and I'll explain that in a second. But because ego is designed to protect you, first and foremost, you're going to reject thoughts become things. That coach is crazy. He says thought become things. You're going to reject it. But then as you start to investigate and you start looking at your life, damn, I was thinking that. I was thinking that. Wow. I was thinking that. Wow. Now you start taking ownership. Okay, now I want to think something different. Start pouring into your life teachers, people. You say, Coach, I don't know anybody. I'm a recluse. I don't get out. I go to work. I come home. It doesn't matter. You can go online, and whatever it is that you give your attention to most often, that's what the algorithm's going to show you. So if you're looking at how to start a business, if you're looking at how to make money, and that becomes what you're consistently searching on, all the different platforms that you're on, because that's what you're searching on, they're going to start sending you that information. Make friends with these people that you agree with. Now, when I say make friends, I don't mean reach out to them and stalk them. What I'm saying is, when I say make friends, look at them more often. You don't ever have to meet them. You don't ever have to reach out to them. You don't have to ever like a comment. You can. It's nice, especially if they're benefiting you. Like me, but you don't have to. Forgive me about my humor. We have to. I think too many of us are too serious about this stuff. But if you make it fun, if you make it enjoyable, you're going to expedite your change. You're going to, just the way it works. But okay, but you start making friends. Napoleon Hill would have this mastermind group, and he would have people like Napoleon, Washington, Lincoln, all the famous people of history, and he would have them in his mastermind. You can do likewise. It says that we become like the 5 people that we hang around. You're like, Coach, well, I don't know anybody. You start following the videos. And every time they have a new upload, you go through and you start listening to what it is that they say, and then you start implementing. Don't just be hearers of the word, be doers of the word. Implement what it is that they tell you to do and see if it works. Some things you're going to find almost immediately you're going to experience life change. Other things are going to take a little while. But make these your core people, people that are doing what it is that you want to do. You start implementing and copying what it is that they're doing, you're going to get similar results. People don't know if you're copying someone, first and foremost, that you're copying them and that you don't know. I used to be a trainer in corporate America, and a gentleman that also used to be a trainer, he was my friend, older gentleman. And he would say, DeCarlo, people want you to succeed for the most part. Most people want you to succeed. They want you to succeed, and they want it because if they see you succeed and they realize that they can succeed. And I know you say, well, Coach, I don't have all the knowledge, I don't have all this insight. A lot of people only need you to be 3 steps ahead of them. They're not trying to go to the person that knows everything. They want somebody that's on their journey, that's a few steps ahead of them. And they say, well, if they can do it, so can I. Be that person in somebody's life that you're a few steps ahead of and say, listen, I'm going to show you what it took for me to get these few steps ahead of you. A lot of times with professors in universities, we assume that when you start a new curriculum, that professor knows everything about that curriculum. A lot of times they're just a few chapters ahead of you, and they just stay a few chapters ahead of you. Now you got that one student that wants to get ahead of everybody in the class, so all of a sudden he or she may be ahead of the professor at one point, but they don't know it. People that you want to transform their lives, or people that you want to impact, people that you want to touch, you simply just need to be a few steps ahead of them. As you immerse yourself in that person of what it is that you want to be doing, have, whether it be in relationships. I talked to Green about, just embodying and getting into the vibration of a more loving relationship with himself. As we do that, it begins to open up doors of opportunity to be in loving relationships with everybody else. A lot of times I encounter people and almost immediately we make a connection because we're operating from that same level of understanding, but we don't know that until we start communicating. Likewise with you. Sometimes you're going to meet somebody and almost instantaneously you're going to say, I don't know what it is about that person, but I like them. And that's simply because you're operating from spirit to spirit, energy to energy like meets like energy. So you're vibrating at the same energy. So you're walking together, as it were. And then there's going to be somebody else that you're not in vibration with them. And you're going to like, I don't know what it is about that person. They just turned me off. They didn't say anything. They didn't do anything. They just turned me off. Begin to clothe yourself in the ideology, the vibration of the person that you want to be, do, or have. And you start living from that person now. And what's going to happen is the people in your life are going to resonate with that person that you're being. And those who don't will simply drop off. A lot of times we're chasing relationships that have ended. We love that person loved us, but that relationship, we're moving at a different level. We're not even at the same vibrational level. And we wonder, how can I get that person? You can get that person back. You just need to drop back down into a lower vibrational level in some cases, or you need to rise up. I don't know what the situation is. But a lot of times we're chasing relationships. We're trying to get SPs at an ego level. And we know that it was a terrible relationship, but we still want to be in that relationship because it's all we know. Understand this, that universe source, God, has something more than you can ask, think, or imagine. If you open up and you start with, Hear, O Israel, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, thy mind, and love the neighbor as thyself. You start loving yourself, that other person's going to show up. Guys, this is Coach DeCarlo. Got to end with that. Love you until we speak next week. For those who will tune in next week, for those who missed a lot of this, go back and listen to the video. There's a lot of information that's going to transform your life, helping you to immerse yourself in that new identity. And it can happen in the twinkling of an eye. Love you guys.